it's Maddie, and welcome to my new series, Maddie Wants to Know, where I interview people from the entertainment business so that kids my age can have a better understanding of what the entertainment world looks like. Today's first guest will be Miss Nellie Beavers. I hope you enjoy! Hi, I'm Madison Akins, and today I'm going to be interviewing Miss Nellie Beavers, all the way from New York City! Thank you for joining me, Miss Nellie.
You're welcome. It's so good to be here.
Without further ado, let's get started. Miss Nellie, I know you've done plenty of things in the Broadway world. Can you tell me some of the things that you've done and a little bit of background information about you?
Sure. So I came to New York when I was 18 years old. I came for college and I went to Fordham, and then I went to the American Musical and Dramatic Academy. And then I started out, I'm a performer, but I'm also a stage manager, and that led me into a little bit of company management. So I've done a lot of tours on the road, and then that led me to kind of being an all-purpose assistant. And so I've done a lot of work in general management offices where they do like the day-to-day operations of a show, and I've done a lot of work with directors, and I've worked on tours, and I've gone on the road for I was on the road for about 7 years with like different shows, doing different things, and now I work with a director named Richard J. Alexander, and he is a director for Broadway stars who do concerts. So people that you may have heard of, like Kristen Chenoweth or Barbara Streisand, Norm Lewis. We've worked with all of them, and I do lots of different things just depending on what the show requires. So it's been kind of a fun ride. I had no idea that that's what I was going to end up doing, but here we are 20 years later, and that's how my career has gone.
That is amazing. That's so many things to do. I'm like so overwhelmed with all those things.
Me too.
So I wanted to ask, how old were you when you wanted to be a part of the industry?
Well, I probably was, this is kind of an interesting story. My mom and I, lived in Miami, and one day the tour for Les Miserables came through Miami, and I saw the ad on TV. I was probably about 6 years old, and I saw the ad on TV, and I said, I want to see that. And my mom was like, you do? And I was like, yes, Les Miserables, the miserable ones. I'm into it. Let's go. And she was like, okay. And luckily she's very supportive. So she was, she bought tickets. We went to see the show. I will never live down the fact that I fell asleep during second act. My mother will never let me forget that. And I've seen it many times all the way through. But I was probably about 6 or 7 when I kind of understood what theater was and that it was something that people did as their job. And then probably when I was about 12 or 13, I started singing in choirs and doing a lot of musicals in school and stuff. And it just kind of stuck, and I liked it, and I didn't really know why. It hit me, and they call it getting bit by the bug, right? So I got bit by the bug, and it's been in my bones ever since.
On the topic of doing musicals in elementary, what type of musicals did you do?
Mostly we did the Christmas pageants. That was the big musical, and the big deal was that in 8th grade I got to be Mary, which was a huge deal in our school. We had a funny we didn't do big musicals. I think we did Cinderella in 6th grade, and I was both the evil stepmother and the fairy godmother because they never appear on stage at the same time. So there was like a huge costume change in the middle where I like put the robe over my stepmother dress, and then suddenly I got to be nice. And then I think in 1st grade I was in like the Thanksgiving play. I might have been a turkey. I was definitely a Cabbage Patch in like the Cabbage Patch Christmas parade in like 2nd grade. So it was all like little. There was no big production value, I can tell you that. But there was Mrs. Fernandez snapping the beat to the music every single number. I will never forget that as long as I live.
I feel
So
like
I don't think we did big.
teacher. I feel
Yeah,
like
exactly, exactly. For real. Um, and so I don't think it was until I was in college that I did a real musical where we did the full score and the entire book. Because when I was in school, I know Broadway Junior is a big thing right now, and I actually did the first promo tour for them when they first started Broadway Junior. I was in the tour that went to all the schools and like showed them what the abridged versions of the Broadway Juniors are. And so we didn't have that. It wasn't feasible really for an elementary school or a middle school to do a big musical because they were too expensive and like they're long and nobody wants to sit there for 3 hours while middle schoolers act out the entirety of any musical. Um, but the abridged versions are perfect. So I didn't have a lot of experience going into school, going into college. I was just doing whatever they would. I did a lot of choir singing though. Any choir that they would put me in, I would go into it.
well, that's probably a good idea to give you more experience. But
Exactly.
I was also going to ask, speaking of like this time, um, how has COVID really affected you personally?
Well, so I'm in theater, right? And right now there's not a lot of theater. I'm in this lovely virtual house, this virtual theater right now, which is empty, which like most of the theaters are right now. Um, And so it's been a little tricky because I have the skill sets that I have and I do a lot of different things. I do a lot of photo editing and video editing also. And right now is great for video editing because everyone's doing videos, right? So
Yeah.
I've been approached by a lot of choral choruses that are trying to do choral videos and things like that. Um, but I've just mainly been home. My highlight, people, the new thing is ask, what's the highlight of your quarantine? I have two things. I put a hammock out on my fire escape because I live in New York City, so I don't have a balcony, but I do have a fire escape. And last summer or this summer, I hooked up my hammock so I can go out and I can sit in the hammock among the trees in my courtyard and of the courtyard of my building, and I can like just sit there and like be at one with nature and outside of my four walls of my apartment because I live in a little tiny studio. And I also got two cats. So I just adopted two cats, and that's been pretty fun because they're little babies and they're really sweet and fun, and they're funny together. So that's been good. But work has been challenging for sure. And a lot of us in the Broadway community, we have a virtual cocktail hour that we started doing every week when we thought it was just going to be like 2 or 3 weeks. Every Friday night, we'd all meet up on Zoom and like have a cocktail together because we're all over 21. And it got, as it went on longer and longer, we all kind of had things that we were doing. So we made it every 4 weeks and then every 6 weeks and then every 8 weeks. And now we're doing it about every 8 weeks. We're making sure that we touch base again. So that's been nice to keep in touch with everybody, but it has been difficult because I think about the people that is the one thing that they mainly do. Of course, like our skills are all transferable, but to do what right now? If you don't have a job that's like steady right now, it's really, really tricky. And that's not just theater, it's a lot of industries, but it's a crazy time, right?
Yeah, that I really agree with that. But also on the topic of like quarantine and stuff, what would be your favorite thing to do?
My favorite thing during quarantine, like to do during quarantine, is that the question?
Yeah.
I mean, definitely to go sit out on that hammock. I love to go sit out on the hammock. So I pick a movie. So here's like the quarantine Saturday night event. Here's what happens in my house. I order pizza from a place called 314 Pizza in New York City. I think it's 314 Bar 314. But they have this amazing pizza that has gorgonzola and pepperoni and honey on it,
Ooh, that sounds
and
good.
it's a flavor combination like nothing you've ever tasted before. It's delicious. And then I pick a new movie to watch. I'm going to watch a whole movie, and I get the when the pizza comes, I get the pizza, I get my phone, I get my headphones, I crawl out of my window into my hammock, and I sit in the dark. I put little twinkle lights out on my patio too, or my patio. Now it's a patio. It's not. It's a fire escape. It's like this big. But I put on the twinkle lights and I sit in the hammock and I watch whatever movie I picked and I eat my pizza. And that's the big to do in quarantine.
That's like sounds like the best thing to do.
Yeah.
But I do you have any recommendations for maybe kids to do during quarantine?
Yeah, absolutely. So, this is how we met actually. Particularly for theater kids and for singers, I love the Smule app. It's called Sing, S-I-N-G, exclamation point, by Smule, S-M-U-L-E. And it's basically a karaoke app. And you can actually join other people's collaborations for free. So even if you don't have a paid account, you can join people's duets. And a lot of people actually put up duets that they don't even sing on. So they'll put a like thing in the comment that says, "This one's all you," or you sing the whole song, and they put it up because they maybe have a paid account, and then they put up the track so that somebody who doesn't have a paid account can sing it. So but I love singing with people on Smule because it's a great way to meet people. You meet lots of talented people. Sometimes you get duets with people who are just learning how to sing, I'll say that. But it's such a good time, and I've met so many great people through that.
Yeah, that's so awesome. Yeah, we did actually met like within that.
Yeah, I mean, that's how we really started talking to each other.
Yeah. But I was also going to ask, what is it like being involved behind the scenes in Broadway?
It's a whirlwind. So actually, tomorrow I'm going to film something. I'm not sure if I can say what it is, so I'm not going to say what it is. But I'm going to film something that'll be out in December. It's a concert that'll be out in December. And you know, COVID aside, I've done this concert for many years, and COVID aside, it's always a big rush, right? So we're going to get the props, we're going to get the making sure that the lyric sheets are correct, making sure that, our song. So there's a thing you have to do where you have to give the press a list of the songs and everybody who wrote them so that they can properly credit when they write their articles. So I have to write those. We have to write the script. So even a concert, something that people may not understand is that a concert that you see, in a lot of cases, when people talk in between their songs in a concert, it seems very, on the off the cuff and like they just are talking about it right now. But a lot of the time, it's very much so scripted. And that's not to say that it's not genuine or it's not their own words. It definitely is. Like, usually when we help write the dialogue, we're taking the words, like someone will tell us a story and we use the words that they say when they're, so that it feels like it is their words when they're saying it. But it is pretty scripted, and because you want to make sure that you're concise in what you say, because there's, people start rambling and then forget it. You've lost the audience and nobody even knows what song is next. So you want to make sure that you go from song to song to song, and that's where rehearsal comes into play. So that's one thing. And then when you're at a Broadway show, the space is so tiny backstage. Everybody, I don't know what people think. Have you been backstage before?
I've actually done one musical locally, but not.
Okay. So the house is especially when you're coming from regional to New York. New York theaters are so tiny backstage. It's actually one of the reasons, more so than the audience even, that theater can't come back until we have like a good vaccine and are all healthy, because there is not 6 feet of space backstage. So if you have three people waiting for their entrance, they will not be distanced from each other because they cannot, unless they're going to suddenly go through the wall. So it's a lot of good energy, a lot of like hubbub and bustle. And when you're in a show that has lots of costume changes, like people are always going up and down the stairs. And it's just, the in a chorus line when they're like, up a steep and very narrow stairway, like, that's not a joke. You really are going up a steep and very narrow stairway.
Well, I find it so interesting that you can still do concerts even within COVID. How are you actually doing that? Is it going to be like virtual? Is it going to be videoed?
Yep. So we're filming it. So we are allowed to have four people in the room besides the people that are performing. Um, the musicians are all going to wear their masks the whole time. They're supplying us with N95 masks, which are a little bit more protective. So we all will have N95s the whole day, and the venue is giving them to us so that we don't. No one's worried about what kind of mask is this person wearing. Like they're giving us issued masks. We're gonna have four people in the room besides the musicians. There's cameras are filming, and then they're gonna take it away after. We're filming on Friday. We have a rehearsal tomorrow, and we're filming on Friday. Everyone has had to have COVID tests before we go. We all have had to sign releases and waivers saying that that we haven't been in contact with anybody who has been positive. We haven't been positive in the last 14 days or 21 days, depending on what the situation is. And then we also have to fill out a form the day of saying that we're not experiencing any symptoms. And then we get our temperature checked when we get there. Although it's kind of funny because in New York right now it's cold. So whenever you get your temperature checked anywhere, someone's like, oh, you're really cold. I'm like, yeah, because it's cold outside and I'm standing outside. But then I'm trying to think. So the musicians will be spaced out. We do have a couple of duets happening. They will wear their masks until it's time to perform. And then the singers will take their masks off when it's time to perform and when we film them. And then they'll put their masks right back on after that. And then I'm trying to think what else, like what other precautions we're doing. So it'll be filmed and then it'll be streamed online.
Do you know where that's going to be streamed?
It'll be on Broadway World.
Broadway World.
Yep.
Okay.
And I will tell you when I know that I'm allowed to tell you. I will tell you what it is so you can post for the people.
Okay. I was also going to ask, do any of your parents or relatives do acting?
They don't. My dad was an architect and my mom was a teacher. And I mean, I guess you could maybe say teaching is a little bit of a performance, right? You have to get up in front of people and talk, so you're not afraid to speak in front of people. But no, my parents were not performers. I'm trying to think. There were a couple of close family friends that we had that ended up being on Broadway a few times. And so I very much looked up to them. I had amazing teachers, like music teachers, that really encouraged me all the time. And I'm really just very grateful for that because there were not a lot of times in my growing up or when my career was very hard, when I was doing a lot of auditions and not getting a lot of roles, just because that's the way the numbers roll. That's just how it goes. I'll tell you a story in a minute that about auditions and things like that. But I never really had a sense, because of the support I had growing up and when I was coming into all of this, I never really had a sense that I couldn't do it, right? There was sometimes the sense that there wasn't the right job for me, or maybe somebody else. There were other things that made the role happen for somebody else and not for me. But I never felt like I can't do this. It was just like the right timing hasn't come along yet. Yeah. And the story I was going to say is, I know that you had an audition recently, very recently, and your mom was saying to me, she was like, I'm so nervous. she was like, Maddie's fine. Maddie like did the audition and then went outside and played. But I'm like, oh gosh, what do I do? And I was like, well, she seems made for it. I'm like, that's the right decision. I mean, you have to just do the audition and then let it go, like you can't be worried about like, did I do it right? Because I was saying to your mom, like, if the role is right for you, or if you are right for the role, there's nothing you can do wrong. Yeah. And if you're not right for the role, or the role is not for you today, there's nothing you can do right. So do what you're gonna do, and then let it go and let the cards fall where they may. And I think that that's a really great attitude that you have about it. as far as like, well, this is what I do. So if you can use it, then great. And if you can't, that's okay too. Not today.
Yeah. Have you gotten any roles where you like, I love this role so much? And like, what was
Um,
that experience like?
yeah, so actually this story I this was the Broadway Junior role that I had.
Mhm.
They they ended up calling me. So I went in for the audition, and I actually was working a job at that time. I was a tour guide, like in New York City. And at that day of the audition, I had a group that I had like left in Times Square for an hour so that I could go run to this audition real quick. I was like, you guys are gonna have lunch in Times Square. I'll meet you back here in an hour and a half. And I like ran to Ripley Greer for my audition. And
Mhm.
I went upstairs and I did my audition, and then they wanted me to stay for a minute to dance, and I was like, oh, okay, I have to kind of have to go, but okay. I was like, I can stay till 2, but and I have to go. And I did the audition. It was fine. Like it was pretty simple choreography. And then I left and I got called back for the next day, and I was like, okay, well, I guess we're gonna have lunch in Times Square again today, with my group. And then I went to the callback, and the character was so it was a bunch of middle schoolers. The characters were middle schoolers who were putting on a show, and they had to choose between the 3 Broadway Junior shows, and they had to do oral reports in order to decide which ones, right? So you're putting on part of the show, and so we did a little bit of Music Man, a little bit of Into the Woods, and a little bit of Dear Edwina. And the character that I was playing was the stage manager of the class in the school. So
So
it
funny.
was hilarious because it was just me. Like I was Danielle. I was Danielle. There was no question in my mind. And I was like, can we hurry up? Because my group is going to be done with lunch soon. But I am Danielle, just so you know, like I am her. You don't have to worry. And initially, I actually didn't get cast. They wanted to hire me to be the like the assistant stage manager on the actual tour, not in the show,
What?
and to understudy the role, but to actually be the actual assistant stage manager. And I didn't really want to do that. I wanted to perform at the time, and so I asked for like just the most ridiculous amount of money to do that. And they were like, "Oh, we don't really have that in the budget." And I was like, "Okay, I understand. Then I'm not going to do it." And about 3 weeks later, they called me back, and they asked me to do the role in the show instead. And I was like, yes. And I just had the best time. And recently I was with a friend of mine who I have from that tour, and we watched the show. We had a video of it that he had unearthed from moving, and we watched it. And I was like, man, that girl Danielle, she's so funny. But I really felt akin to her.
That's really awesome. But just to wrap it up real quickly, do you have any advice for young kids who want to act?
Yeah, I think that the best thing you can do is get into any performing that you can where you live. So, whether it's a choir, whether it's dance, whether it's an acting class, anything that you can do where you are, that's the best way to start. Because the more experience you get, the more you decide, I want to do this more or I want to do this less. And I think that that's the best thing you can do. Read plays, listen to musicals, go down the YouTube rabbit hole, um, and really get familiar with material and learn about everything you can in the industry, because a lot of people who do what I do in the industry are started as performers because that's all they knew existed, right? They were like, oh, I want to do musicals, so clearly I have to be a performer because those are the only people on stage. But there's 100 people backstage, so you can be doing theater if performing isn't the only thing you want to do. And the last thing I will say, as far as advice is concerned, is there's a common um, phrase or thing that people say, which is, if you can do anything else, do that. And I'm going to counter that. And I'm going to say, if you can be happy doing anything else, do that. But you know, if where your heart is, go with where your heart is how I will say that. Because and I think the reason that they say if you can do anything else, do that, is because it's difficult what we do. It's hard. It takes a lot of commitment. It takes a lot of just having a strong back and saying, hearing no a million times and then waiting for the one yes that's the one that you want. So it's not that you should do something else if you can. It's that this is very difficult. So unless you love it, don't do it. That's my advice.
That's amazing advice, and I just wanted to say thank you so much for joining me today and all this amazing advice you gave me. I learned so much from this, and I just want to say thank you so much.
You are so welcome. Bye.
Thank you again, Miss Nellie, for the great advice. Here's some things to remember. When you go into audition, don't worry about it after. In the entertainment business, you have to love it to be in it. And there's more to Broadway than just being on stage. Thank you so much for watching, and make sure to comment some questions that you might have for future interviews. I'm lining up my interviews right now. Stay tuned.